listen.
Welcome to Nintendo Voice Chat episode 475. I'm your host for the week, Zach Ryan, and joining me today, Brian Altano.
Hello.
Thomas Marks.
Hello.
And then all the way from the UK, our friend and yours, Joe Scrabbles. Hi, Joe.
Hello, how are you?
I'm well. It's nighttime over there. What's that like?
Well, I've had a beer, so I'm doing good.
Unbelievable. You UK boys are always drinking on the podcasts.
Well, I finished the drink,
Yeah.
so technically I'm professional again.
It's illegal.
So,
It's illegal in the United States. Joe, for the listeners that don't know who you are, can you tell us a little bit about yourself, what you do for IGN, etc.?
Yes, I'm the IGN UK deputy editor, which means that I just do the stuff that everyone else in the same office does because there's too few of us. But basically what I've done that makes me deserve to be on NVC is review Link's Awakening.
Which a polite
really
golf
nice.
clap for Joe. Well done, Joseph. We're going to talk about your review later in the episode, but this week we're also going to talk about Tom's time with the Nintendo Switch Lite.
Oh, here it is.
Joe, I thought you might want to give us some final thoughts on your Daemon X Machina review because I don't think any of us have been able to spend a ton of time on that. And then we're going to talk a little bit about Sayonara Wild Hearts, and then Tom has a very special interview prepared for us with a very special friend of his. Yeah. So let's just get right into it. I did want to talk really quickly about some news this week, not a ton of news. The first of which is that Nintendo is once again cracking down on ROMs. Now, we here at IGN don't support the use of ROMs, but I did want to talk about this because Nintendo has this long history of like really being litigious about ROMs. And this week in particular, they've come down super hard on a ROM site that is selling both new Switch ROMs and old ROMs as well, and they're coming after them for $150,000 a piece. So for every ROM that they've put out there, they're expecting big time money for a total of like $2 million this time around. Ooh. Yeah, and I just kind of wanted to get your guys' opinions, your thoughts on what that's looking like in this day and age with all of their basically like their litigious outlook on what their stance is on ROMs.
I do support ROMs. I think that legally you're allowed to own backups of video games you have physical copies of. That's how that works. And so that's totally fine. The issue here was this site was selling a subscription service to access them.
Right.
Which is stupid.
Yeah.
Like that's just straight up stupid. Like if you're going to steal stuff and just put it out there, don't sell it too. Like I think that like there's a lot of people who basically go in and they try to find games. ROMs are they're wonderful for video game history. They're wonderful for preservation. I think for people who just steal them and don't try to access them legally, like they should be sort of a last resort. Obviously, there's a lot of gray area there. But to just straight up sell a subscription service to other people's goods is dumb as hell, and I think they deserve to get shut down for that.
Yeah, and for clarification, I will say that IGN as a platform, as a media outlet, doesn't support theft through ROMs. Not to say like your point isn't valid. I just wanted to put that out there as a entity, IGN doesn't support.
Yeah, no, I mean we jump through very strict hoops just to capture a video game that we could download in half a second, just because we're playing by the books.
It makes features difficult, but
including all the Link's Awakening coverage we did.
Yeah, and I can't say that I haven't definitely played Metroid. Or a previous Zelda on my Macintosh computer via ROM. So
there's obviously a lot. I played through Super Mario Land 1 and 2 recently because like some fan had fully colored them. And it's like, I own those. Physically own those Game Boy carts. I have bought them numerous times physically and digitally. I don't know if that makes stealing this round okay. It's, again, a very gray.
We've all heard your rant on the original Super Mario, so I feel like in that regard, like you're probably covered.
Yeah. I mean, so it's all very nebulous and gray. I think it's very cut and dry when you sell a subscription service to access this type of stuff that doesn't belong to you to begin with.
Nintendo's
There is that. Oh, sorry.
Go ahead, Joe.
There is that weird sort of semi-confirmed conspiracy theory that Nintendo used a ROM to release one of its Virtual Console Mario games.
Correct.
That's a bit of fun.
Right.
But in a more kind of general sense, like Nintendo is probably one of the most kind of common negative pieces of Nintendo like news out there is based around this ROM stuff.
Right.
And Nintendo makes it very hard to play its back catalog. So people do find a need to catalog these ROMs. It's just when, like Brian says, selling those things is insane.
Yeah.
But there needs to be a better system for cataloging, keeping this stuff.
And I think that's dead on, and it's very similar to how I feel about it. I think once you start getting into Switch games and new games, that's more cut and dry, just sort of like you just don't want to pay for this rather than you're trying to find something. But I think that how excited we were about the SNES Online stuff is exactly what you're saying, Joe. The reason people go to ROMs to download those old games is because they're saying, I want to be able to play this. And in a lot of cases, there is not a legal way to do that.
Yeah.
And I think that Nintendo is 100% within their legal right to take aggressive action against this sort of stuff, especially, as we've said again, in cases where they're actually, the person is actually paying, charging money for them, which is just ludicrous.
Absolutely.
But at the same time, I think the better way, or a more PR-friendly way, if you will, to combat that stuff is just make these old games as easily available legally as they can possibly do it.
Right.
Which they're also doing.
They're capable of doing that with most first and some third-party stuff. But then, arises the ethical quandary of if a company's defunct, out of business, gone, and that is just a game sitting there in the archives in history, just impossible to get legally in any capacity. What do you do?
Right.
I mean, you can hunt down the card on eBay. That being said, I think everyone in the world agrees selling them is illegal.
Right, and I wanted to close on, this is Nintendo's statement. This comes via Engadget. They're coming after this particular retailer because it's built largely on brazen and mass-scale infringement of Nintendo's intellectual property rights, and that through the site, hundreds of thousands of copies of Nintendo games have been illegally downloaded. So I think it's safe to say that, like Tom said, obviously they're going to go after these people super hard. They're well within their rights, but there's also a preservation angle and a rarity angle that needs to be considered in this kind of thing. So just wanted to talk about that a little bit before we got into the biggest news of the week, possibly the biggest news of the year, and that is Sirfetch'd has been announced for Pokemon Sword and Shield.
I was like, oh no, they didn't announce another one?
Basically nothing else matters. Far be it for any of us on this panel to talk so candidly about Pokemon, because we're obviously not Pokemon masters like our friend Casey DeFreitas.
Well, I love Pokemon.
I mean, so do I, but none of us have the meta knowledge that Casey does, and I'm sure that she would shed a lot of light on this. I just wanted to talk about Sirfetch'd because I think he is great. He has a sword and a shield, making him the best of both games. They've been teasing this glitched Pokemon for a while, and it turns out that it's Sirfetch'd, an evolution of a duck that nobody cared about until this moment. I don't feel like Farfetch'd was beloved until this story came around.
You want to talk to the Welsh, mate?
Oh,
the Welsh love that guy. He's got a leak.
That's fair. Our friend Gav is just all about Farfetch'd. Is that what you're saying? Okay. This is Farfetch'd's first evolution in 23 years, so he's coming back in a big way. But my question to the panel here is they talked about Sirfetch'd being exclusive to the Sword version of Sword and Shield. So now that it's got better legendaries and Sirfetch'd, what does that mean for Shield? Is anybody looking to buy Shield? I know Pear said that he was going to do it because he loves to support an underdog, but is the Shield version of this game getting all the best stuff?
I think Shield is just waiting.
Or Sword, I mean.
Yeah, I think Shield is just waiting for whatever its version of Sirfetch'd is, right? It won't literally be a Farfetch'd evolution, but people were looking at okay, what sort of shelly or defensive Pokemon will maybe get a Galarian variant evolution for Shield exclusively.
Can you say Galarian variant 5 times fast?
I could,
Don't try.
but I don't think people would want to hear it. I think that this is a really, really wonderful regional evolution, though. It's so weird and cool. I love the way that somebody pointed out on Twitter that if you take the shield and line it up with the top of the sword, it actually you can see that the Farfetch'd cut that leak in half, and that the shield is the top half of the leak. It lines up like that. It's very weird and cool, and it's just a really, really nice design.
I cook a lot, and I could have sworn that was a green onion.
It might have evolved into a green onion.
Yeah.
So it's a leak of so this is the weird thing. Do vegetables evolve? Is the leak part of the Pokemon?
Maybe,
what's going on
here? I don't know
here?
if it's part of his body.
Somebody tweeted at us about at the NVC Twitter account about Question Block, and they said that they had so many questions about Sirfetch'd because is that Pokemon born with the leak in the shield? Does it form that out of its own body? Where does that come from? There's a lot of biological issues to be addressed with this particular Pokemon, I feel like. But I will say, Farfetch'd actually introduced me to the leek as a child because I also thought it was a green onion until
Yeah.
I had the Pokemon cards that said his attack was leek slap.
Quick cooking tip while we're here. If you're buying leeks at the grocery store to cook with, it's sort of like a sweeter onion. Wash them. They're full of dirt. They're so seriously like give them a good rinse, pull them apart, and then chop them up.
There's a lot of crannies in a leek.
Yeah.
You don't want any dirt in the crannies.
Yeah, I made soup with one once without cleaning it, and it was like dirt soup.
Grit.
Can I just provide a counterpoint for a second?
Sure.
Don't wash the leeks.
Don't wash your leeks. Leave those leeks alone. Sirfetch'd is the typical Pokemon bird, which is to say it's just a bird, and I hate that. And all the birds in Pokemon suck. And Sirfetch'd isn't much better. Like, I think you guys have been blinded by the whole regional thing. We've got swords and shields on every street corner here. Everyone's got them. We just carry them around. That's not new to me. Sirfetch'd is just another duck. And until Pokemon creates a bird Pokemon in the vein of Horlucha, who is the only good bird Pokemon, there is no point in Sirfetch'd. I'm sorry, I have to say it.
Okay. I want to close this out by asking, does this sway anybody's opinion? Are they changing their vote from shield to sword? Does this change like which version of the game that you're going to buy?
No, I was probably always going to try sword.
Yeah,
It
me
just sounds
too.
cooler.
I want to be friends with this duck. I don't care what Joe says.
It re-solidifies me getting shield, actually.
No, really? Why? Because you're such a contrarian?
No, because I'm always going to get the less popular one because then I have more people to trade with.
That's fair. That's a good point. Always so logical, Thomas.
Yeah.
Our last bit of news today before we move on to the big stuff. Classic Dragon Quest games are coming to the West. We finally got an announcement that the Edric trilogy, that's Dragon Quest 1, Dragon Quest 2, Luminaries of the Legendary Line, and Dragon Quest 3, Seeds of Salvation, will launch alongside Dragon Quest 11 on September 27th. For $4.99, $6.49, and $12.49 respectively. And I think this is cool because I've been playing a lot of Dragon Quest XI, the demo version, very into that game, and it's nice to know that there's some history coming along with it too. Have you guys ever messed with any of these old Dragon Quest boys?
Yeah, here and there. Those are huge, long, sort of tedious games, but like I agree, it's cool that there's a place for them on Switch.
Joe, Tom, any thoughts on this?
I think it's nice. I mean, I can't really go from the we should protect video game history by endorsing ROMs to saying that this is a bad move. So it's great. I love it. I just can't see myself playing them anytime soon.
I'm really glad you didn't paint yourself into a corner on that one, Joe. Okay, now let's talk really quickly about what we've been playing over the course of the last week. Brian, I feel like I probably know what game you've been playing mostly.
Mostly Link's Awakening and then some Goose Game.
Oh, yeah. Are we allowed to talk about Goose Game?
Can't quite talk about Goose Game yet, unfortunately.
Okay. But the goose is loose. Can we say that much?
Goose will be loose soon.
Goose will be loose on Friday, September 20th.
Maybe if you're listening to this podcast, the goose is already loose and you're already doing a lot of goose stuff.
And we will have a review of Goose Game on Friday. So if you're listening to it on Friday or after, you can go check it out on iTunes.
And you're reviewing that
I
game?
am reviewing Goose Game.
And how many honks will you give it?
A couple.
Okay, good.
A satisfactory amount of honks.
That's fair. All right. What have you been playing besides Goose Game?
I've been playing a lot of Sayonara Wild Hearts, which I know we're going to talk about later.
True.
And then, honestly, just like a bunch of different stuff. I've just been jumping around because I've been testing the Switch Lite. So I've been going... I've played Fire Emblem. I've played Breath of the Wild, which was a treat to be back into, and I haven't played it in like a year. I was playing Mario Kart. I was playing Celeste. I was jumping to as many different rocks as I could to try to get a vibe of as many different things as I could while playing this.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's mostly. The other thing I've been doing is a lot of Slay the Spire on PC, actually, because they just released the 4th character into beta there. Mm-hmm. So I've been testing that out on PC, which will eventually make its way to the Switch version.
Man, I've heard so much about Slay the Spire, and in a majority of those conversations, every time I listen to them, it's like, the game doesn't really sound like it's for me, but everybody loves it so much that I feel like I should give it a shot. And given that this year I've played a lot of games that I have felt are not traditionally for me and have really enjoyed, it seems like maybe it's something I should try. So you think I should give Slay the Spire a go?
I mean, I'd recommend most people at least try it, but obviously it's harder to do when it's $15 or whatever it is.
Sure.
As we talk about Slay the Spire, full disclosure, Humble Bundle publishes it on Switch, and they are owned by Ziff Davis, our parent company,
Correct.
but they don't influence coverage at all. And I liked it a lot when they were not involved with it still. So there you go.
Anyway, 10 out of 10 for that game.
I gave it a score.
I finally finished Fire Emblem, which I'm proud to say. I can't remember. I honestly can't remember if I finished Awakening or not. But I'm very glad to say that I finished a Fire Emblem game. That was a very good game. It was very long. I spent almost 70 hours finishing that game. I have thoughts and opinions of how that game ended in the latter half. Joe, are you playing Fire Emblem at all?
Yeah, I mean, that's one of many games I'm desperately trying to finish, but have been interrupted constantly on. Like Astral Chain as well is another one of those ones where it just I keep having an hour and being like, this is amazing. Oh, I have to stop again.
Right.
So, yeah.
Yeah,
it's not great.
I really, really enjoyed Fire Emblem. I'm looking forward to the DLC. I want to do the alternate paths, but probably not for some time. And I wanted to ask the audience a question. Would you be interested in hearing NVC do a spoiler cast? There are several of us in the audience that have finished the game and have a lot of thoughts about it. I know Per is done with it. I think Casey's wrapping it up. So it'd be cool to sit down and talk about it, but I wonder if we've missed the boat because a lot of you have already tweeted at us saying, like, I finished the game 9 times, which is crazy. Go outside.
Do you have to finish all 3 to
So I've
actually
heard
successfully do a spoiler?
I've heard that to get the true ending, to understand like the full plot, because the story is divided in a way that it's like you see different sides to the story.
Right.
And to fully understand the plot, you're supposed to have finished all 4 paths, but it's like that's like hundreds of hours of game time. And for me, the path that I chose the Black Eagles path. It was such a satisfactory experience, and like I got enough of that story that like down the line, maybe in a year or something, I'll try another path and see what the other half of that looks like. But yeah, I'm curious to see what our audience thinks and whether or not they're interested in hearing our hot takes.
What if you do the spoiler cast with people who have finished them all and they spoil those endings for you?
Yeah, it's fine. Yeah,
Okay. That's a good attitude to have.
I feel like I have a weird thing about spoilers where like I don't. There's certain things where spoilers like don't bother me at all. I'm more interested in seeing the way that those spoilers would potentially play out.
Right.
There are some franchises like Star Wars or something like that where I'm like, I don't want to hear a spoiler about it. But there are a lot of things where I'm just like, yeah, I don't care. You can tell. Like Red Dead Redemption 2, I never finished.
Yeah.
And I just told Tina when she finished it, I was like, I'm never going to finish this game. Just tell me how it ends. And she told me the whole plot. And like some people that would they would cry. Like they would be so upset about that, But spoilers to me are I think far down the line.
If you get that information sort of foisted upon you without asking for
sure.
it, that's an issue. But if like you bail on something and then it happens, that's okay.
I mean, I'm still shocked that all those space aliens came down and abducted that man in Red Dead.
In Red Dead? They're probably like 6 months away from just adding that as DLC.
Right. Yeah, no kidding.
We're doing zombies now, so.
Joe, what else have you been playing? I know you said you've been playing bite-sized chunks of a lot of things.
Yeah, so I've been I've had a bit of Divinity, a bit of Marvel Ultimate Alliance, just trying all this stuff. But this week I also got to try a game that is soon to be on Switch. So technically I've been playing a Switch game called Tangle Tower, which is a detective game made by the guys that made Snipper Clips.
Oh, yeah.
Man, awesome.
Kind of strange. So they made this game years ago called Detective Grimoire, which is basically a much worse looking version of this game coming out soon, which is a cartoony, really pretty, strange murder mystery where someone has been stabbed, but the murder weapon seems to be a knife in a painting, and they're trying to work out how that could possibly be true.
Curious.
And so it's a bit Edith Finch-y as well. It's this one house owned by 2 different families who live in 2 sides of this house, and they don't like each other. And so you're going around piecing together their statements, trying to work out where they were at what times, and then trying to work out their secrets to find out what's happened. I've played like a couple of hours and it's really good. There's a lot, you have to kind of be into the idea of a lot of listening, a lot of learning. It doesn't kind of do a telltale remember me or they'll remember that type thing.
Sure.
So you have to kind of trust that it's learning stuff behind the scenes, but I'm really enjoying it. And it's properly funny as well, like a genuinely laugh out loud funny game, which you don't get very often.
Yeah.
It's out on Apple Arcade today, and it comes out for Switch hopefully in October.
Oh, cool.
So I would look forward to it. I think it's really good.
Give us the name of that again.
Tangle Tower.
Tangle Tower, right on. But I feel like you've spent the majority of your time playing Link's Awakening for review.
Yes.
Yeah, so let's jump right into this, our big topic this week. Link's Awakening is out today. Well, tonight, I guess.
Yes.
And that's a real good game. Joe, you gave it a 9.4 in your review. But I will say that IGN originally gave this game a 9.5. So my first question to you is, why do you hate this game so much?
Well, I'm fully prepared to answer this question.
Thank you.
If you care about 10-year-old review scores for games, then you should stop caring about game reviews in general. This is a 9.4 based on what I currently think about it, and not based on what IGN someone else used to think about it.
To be fair, I think that review was by Craig Harris, who gave like every Game Boy game a 10. So
yeah. And
So
to be
actually,
fair, he should have given that one a 10.
also true. Yeah.
But yeah, like, I love this game. And so me and Brian talked a lot about it whilst we were in the process of playing it. I don't have the nostalgia for it that Brian does. I played the game when I was a kid, but I got stuck. And I only completed it on the Game Boy Color version on 3DS a few weeks before reviewing this game, because I knew I was going to be reviewing it.
Okay.
Which is, I think, one of the best reasons for you to review this game and not someone like me, because I'm in too deep.
Yeah, your Stockholm syndrome for Koholin Island.
So that's interesting. That's interesting that you replayed the original version right before this new version, because we had a lot of people asking, should I go back and play the original version first? Should I experience this thing as its own thing and then try the original version later?
Yeah, I mostly told people don't do that, because it's like if you waited 27 years or whatever, you can wait 2 days.
And I also personally, I also feel like there's a bit of fatigue that happens there, because it is almost a 1-to-1 remake, right?
Yeah.
Like you do the same things, there are the same storyline, et cetera. So how do you feel about that?
In terms of whether people should go back and play the original, I don't do it.
Okay.
It's to me, like you say, it's a 1-to-1 remake. Apart, they've made it look different and the overworld is seamless, but patches of grass are in the same place. Patches of dirt are in the same place. Like, it is so faithful that there isn't a need. And honestly, going back, I really like Link's Awakening. This is going to sound like I'm not into it. There's stuff I don't like about that game in its Game Boy form. There's elements of the dungeons I don't think are as strong as other Zelda dungeons. There's a bit of a sort of hidden object puzzle element to it, which I don't like as much as the gear gating puzzles that most Zelda games go for. But so much of that is based around just not being able to find things. And the new version, the graphical upgrade makes all that stuff so much easier to understand. And it doesn't feel like you're being stopped because you can't see something. It feels like you're stopped because there's an actual puzzle to solve, which is so much more satisfying.
You're also spending, because of the items being permanently mapped to so many buttons, you're spending statistically hours and hours less time inventory managing and jumping in and assigning things to one of the two primitive Game Boy buttons,
Just having a full set of buttons that you would expect on a modern controller is like an actual game changer. And it's crazy to say that because that's such a tiny change, but it completely changes the feel of the game.
I was saying last week on the show that I played so much of the original that just sort of instinctually I was jumping in and trying to equip my sword. And I was like, oh, I have that forever. The shield forever. I have like Pegasus boots forever. The power bracelet to lift rocks up. You used to have to equip that, and now it's just there. It's just it's sort of this automatically equipped item. But yeah, the skeletal frame of this game is identical. The coat of paint is fantastic. There's obviously you talked a little bit about it too. There's a little bit of frame rate hiccup stuff, which happens specifically in Mabe Village and in the Animal Village. I think that's where the game is sort of the most taxed in terms of how much is happening at once, but it never happens underground in any of the dungeons, and it doesn't really interface with anything that you're doing in the overworld in terms of combat. So I've never died from it, but it's definitely something that's a little bit noticeable. Then again, like there's games like Bloodborne, right? One of my favorite games of all time. It has terrible frame rate at times. Breath of the Wild shipped with massive issues.
Well, that's what I was going to say. Is like
areas.
Contractually, every Zelda game on Switch has to have one area that has a bad frame rate. That's just the law. So, Zelda Breath of the Wild had the forest, and this one sounds like maybe Village is the frame rate area, but like it's good to know that Nintendo's playing within legal boundaries. So,
yeah, and in terms of like adding new content, they doubled the amount of seashells and heart pieces, and they added a bunch of like sort of Nintendo figurines that you can put on pedestals around town. But I'm sort of happy that they didn't really like reboot the entire thing or George Lucas it and like add a bunch of stuff that like would have made it worse. I do think it's like still one of the best and also probably one of the easiest Zelda games, but I don't know if you got to play Hero Mode at all. Did you play Hero Mode?
I've touched it,
Yeah.
but I haven't played a great deal of it because ultimately I actually don't usually find hero mode very exciting. Like the pleasure of a Zelda game to me is in finding out what those puzzles are and in
Right.
finding that story and that kind of feel of it. I'm not in it for the challenge. Like as soon as I tried not Master Trials, like the hero mode stuff in Breath of the Wild, I suddenly went, oh, it's cool. There's a silver Lionel over there,
Right.
but I don't ever want to play this version of the game.
Yeah, I actually wasn't crazy about the master mode stuff in Breath of the Wild because of the auto regenerating enemy health. I felt that like you couldn't really like Dark Souls it and fake your way through and just like bash a dude to death with rocks until you know, all your stuff broke. Whereas Link's Awakening, the hero mode is like it's properly difficult. It's It is no enemies in the game drop hearts. There are no hearts in any bushes. When you kill mini bosses, fairies don't appear. There are areas and levels like the Tail Cave, the first dungeon, where there's just hearts floating right after you get the Rock's Feather to show you can jump in the air and get them. They just yank those right out. So like any sort of like hearts that you would find naturally in the overworld are gone. You can get bottles now, which is new for the game, and you can put fairies in them, but there are only 3 in the whole game, and that's like it only brings you so far.
Right.
And
3 bottles, not 3 fairies, right?
3 bottles.
So I think Wind Waker did a similar thing where their hero mode was like no hearts anywhere. And that's Wind Waker HD, and that's like how I prefer to play that game because that game is very, very easy if you don't play in hero mode. I'm curious for first timers who are looking for a challenge, is hero mode in Link's Awakening too challenging, or is it like if you're like hardcore, do you want to start there?
No, I think it's not. I don't think it's too challenging. The thing is, I beat Link's Awakening twice already, and the first time I finished it, I died once, which was an accident because I thought a fairy would kick in automatically. It didn't. I had to automatically release that. And the second time I played through, I died 0 times. So it gives you a little gravestone next to your save file and a star when you beat it that has a number of deaths. And it was 0 for me on my regular playthrough. I got every heart, every collectible. I'm on hero mode now, and I've died something like 27 times.
Oh boy!
By the 3rd dungeon. But when you die, it kind of respawns you pretty close to where you when you're in the overworld, pretty much right near where you had just died. And when you're in a dungeon, back at the beginning. But there's like there's certain fast travel elements around dungeons that help a little bit. If you've played 2D Zelda games before, or you're looking for a challenge, start with hero mode. If you've never played this game before, if you're not familiar with old school 2D Zeldas, just start with the base game. It's a good time. I don't think that like the purpose of this game is to be frustratingly difficult. Like it's a fun, beautiful, heartwarming, dark, charming, weird adventure, and I think it's like worth experiencing in however you feel comfortable.
I think it says a lot that hero mode is available from the start as well.
Cool,
like it gives you that choice straight away. So it's not like you finish the game, now play it again in hard mode. It's do you want a harder game? Yes, there you go. That's the version of the game you play now. That's cool.
Speaking of harder games, have either of you had much time to spend with the dungeon creator?
Yes, I completed it.
Okay, what do you think of that?
So it was something that I was initially not crazy about because it's sort of tedious. Dampe, who is the weird gravekeeper man from Ocarina of Time, basically has a house in this game where the camera shack used to be in the Game Boy Color game. So that's actually the only thing missing in this remake is the camera stuff, but it's been replaced with this entirely new mode. Now, throughout your main campaign, you'll unlock tiles that you can bring, and you don't actually see with them unlock. You basically come back to Dampe, and he'll be like, tell me about your adventures. And then it'll be like this 5 seconds of silence where Link is apparently talking. And then he'll be like, oh, wow, that sounds crazy. Well, anyway, here's a bunch of cool new dungeon tiles. So it doesn't actually make sense, but it's fine. And so
I love the implication of Link just being like, so there was this room. It was 4 blocks wide. There were 2 blocks at the either corner, and one had to be pushed into place to the left.
There's a rabbit you could only kill with pots, and Dampe's like, I'm going to write all that down. Oh, cool. Here's a tile. So they give you all these tiles, and so Dampe starts giving you challenges, and the way they work is they'll basically be a grid, and it'll be like heart-shaped, or they'll be like, put a starting point and put a boss. And the more you play, the more bosses you unlock, the more sort of dungeon pieces you unlock. And so eventually you're able to fill out these massive grids with custom levels, and he'll add sort of qualifiers like you only have 3 hearts for the whole thing, or you have to finish the whole thing in 5 minutes, or blah, 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 blah. And it's interesting and it's cool, and it gets like better and better and better, and then it just starts to kind of drag on and get tedious. The last 12 or 13 challenges he give you are kind of difficult, but also just kind of slow and cumbersome, and the reward for them are just rupees. And by this point in the game, you've probably bought everything you need. Also, the worst element of this mode, which is entirely optional, by the way, although it is the only way to get the third bottle, is that you can't share these levels with anybody else unless you scan an amiibo and then hand them to somebody. And as Joe said in his review, like, you'd have to find Joe on the street to be like, here's my amiibo. Yeah.
Joe, in a year where we also got Mario Maker 2, which is this like incredibly robust like tool set, how do you feel the Dungeon Creator stacks up? Is it even comparable? Is it something that like people will make cool dungeons out of?
That's it. I wanted to find something that felt like a little Mario Maker for Zelda, because I think everyone wants a Super Zelda Maker.
Sure.
Like, that would be the best. It makes me sad that, like, not only is this pretty low kind of effort on the kind of player's side, you put down these jigsaw pieces and they have to be the jigsaw pieces they are. You don't get to customize them. You don't get to move them around all that much, even move where the doors are in those rooms. The element that's missing to me as well is like theming. There's this odd thing that you get these tiles and you're like, oh, I'm going to build this kind of dungeon. And then you have to have like, here's a bit from a lava dungeon. Here's a bit from a water dungeon. It doesn't feel like you're building a place. You're just building a jigsaw set that only kind of notionally fits together.
Right. And I actually found myself using the easiest rooms to get through just to start unlocking stuff quickly, because it just became tedious. And I have a theory about why this mode is sort of gimped. And that's because if it was great, they would have to charge you to go online to play it. Seriously.
That's
like,
fair.
I think that's like the thing about Mario Maker is like the first time around, that was free and you could share levels. And now that is sort of intrinsically connected to their online ecosystem, and they have to justify getting you to pay for that. And so this, it'd be weird to have like a paid side mode in a mainline story-driven Zelda game. So I think it's just, they made it kind of like limited.
Well, if I may, I think probably I don't think you're wrong, but the other factor that goes into that is making games have online functionality, especially with like level creators that you then share, is not easy, right? I think I've mentioned this on the show before, but I once had an indie developer tell me that however long you think your game is going to take to develop, if you have any sort of online functionality in it, double that.
Wow.
Just like,
that's crazy.
Does not matter the game or the scope of the online play just messes with stuff. So it could be also that they just, like you said, they didn't want to invest the resources to overcomplicate that system when probably like that is just a side thing, Yep.
Yeah. We spent a lot of time talking about the not so great part of this game, and I just wanted to reiterate that this game is fantastic. We did give it a 9.4, one of the biggest Switch releases of the year. Tom and I haven't had a ton of opportunity to spend time with the game, but looking forward to diving into that tonight. But Tom has spent quite a bit of time with the Nintendo Switch Lite. So, Tom, you reviewed the game, or you reviewed the Switch Lite, or are in the process of.
Yes.
The original Switch review in 2017, we gave it a 7.0, and then you re-reviewed it last year and gave the Switch an 8.3.
Yes.
Now you're reviewing the Nintendo Switch Lite, and what do you think? How many honks are you going to give it?
Currently, our review in progress, I have it as a temp score right now as an 8.0.
Great.
So that's it's completely subject to change. This is the thing is like, we got our review unit on Tuesday afternoon. We had to actually make the review yesterday. Brian and I did this in lieu of a like fancy edited, full-on video review. We did like a conversation kind of breaking down our initial thoughts on it. And then we made the review yesterday, and that would have left me with like 24 hours of playtime and testing, which for a handheld device, especially where I want to be playing it on the train, I was playing it on the train before the embargo dropped with like a sweater over me so that no one could see me playing it, right? Like it was
top secret Switch.
Yeah, it was like it was not the way you should be testing that on your commute. So I wanted to spend all my time.
Wait. You're on the train with a sweater over your Switch, just like huddled up.
Yeah, just like making sure no one else can see.
And can you tell us about any of the strange looks that you might have received for something?
Well, I can't. I was under a sweater.
That is
fair.
the 100th least weird thing on San Francisco public transportation.
That's okay.
He was
You're
wearing
right.
clothes. It wasn't like the sweater was the only thing he had.
I don't know. I mean, we know Tom pretty well. I feel like that could go either way.
That's true. He might just go bow tie only in the mornings.
just jeans and a bow tie.
But the point being, I've spent a fair amount of time with this more than like Seth got to play at his preview demo or whatever. I've spent a lot of time. I really, really enjoy it, but there's a lot more to test. There's a lot more situations to use it in before we give a final review. But yeah, I'm loving it so far. The thing that immediately jumped out to me is the color. We got this yellow one. If you're watching the video, you can see we have the yellow guy. I think Joe.
Oh, come on.
Joe has the turquoise on screen.
Nice. I didn't even know you had that. How'd you get that?
Yeah, little secret. Oh, I stole it.
Nice.
Yeah.
There was this guy with a sweater on the train, and I just...
The thing that maybe, Joe, you can attest to this for the turquoise, because at least for the yellow, the color immediately was more interesting to me than any of its marketing material.
Yep.
Where like all the marketing material makes it look very shiny and bright, and then you get this actual device and it's completely matte and it's very muted color. It's not as in your face, and as a result, it looks so much more appealing to me. The second thing I noticed is you pick it up and it's like so light. It is featherweight. And
hence the name.
Yeah, I mean, it's an appropriate name. To the point where I was using this thing and it doesn't feel too small, and I was using it and I was like, man, this doesn't really feel much smaller. It feels lighter, but it's not like so much lighter. And then I looked at my Switch and I was like, oh, that's big. And then I picked it up and I was like, oh, that's heavy, right? Like it immediately makes the original Switch look bad. And not like saying the Switch is bad. It's just that it is so much slicker. It is so much more refined. It's so much easier to hold. It's just a wonderful little package.
Yeah, I'll say it's not sort of as profound as something like the first time you played a DS Lite versus the launch DS that looked like a layer cake.
Right.
But it's sort of close to that feeling of like you got so accustomed to something for so long, and then moving over to this much lighter, much more ergonomic form factor, it just makes you look at the old thing and go like, oh, huh. Wow, how did I do that for so long? That said, there's, and you'll get into it right now. This is sort of an edge case Switch.
Yeah.
This is not really, I would not recommend this one to everybody.
It's not for everybody.
Yeah, I was going to say, you gave the Switch last year, you gave it an 8.3, but you're trending on this one at an 8.0. What are some of the negatives here?
The biggest thing is just kind of, it's cheaper, it looks nicer, it has a better kind of structure to it. And this is something I've actually been feeling out like the last day or so since after I finished the review in progress, but like the buttons feel great on it. The D-pad feels great. They have a little more action, the face buttons, and they're really, really nice. The kind of drawback of that is that it's missing a ton of stuff, right? Like it's missing rumble, it's missing the auto brightness adjustment. It can't dock onto a TV, which is like a huge loss. The Joy-Cons don't come off and there's no kickstand, so you just fundamentally can't play things like Snipper Clips or Mario Party without spending a bunch of money on external Joy-Con. And even when you do spend a bunch of money on external Joy-Con, you have to play it on a small screen that you have to get a secondary stand for.
Yeah.
It's like there are certain things that the system just fundamentally isn't designed for that limit it really, really hard in some of those areas, especially like motion controls are fine for like Breath of the Wild's bow aiming. Like those little tiny little movements are fine. But as soon as you start to get into a shrine and you have to do those hammer puzzles where you have to physically move your entire Switch and you can't see the screen anymore, it's borderline unusable in those cases. And obviously that was the same as when you had the base Switch and you had to do that in handheld mode, but that has the option of kicking up the kickstand, taking off the Joy-Con, and doing that.
Yeah, the thing about this one, and people have been making this joke for a long time, but they're like, oh, it's a Switch that doesn't switch, because they think it doesn't go onto your TV, it's just a handheld only thing. The thing that I think is sort of like the less spoken about is the versatility you have with the launch Switch in terms of like bringing out an airplane, popping open the kickstand, taking off the Joy-Cons, and playing like that.
Yeah.
Now, that is handheld mode. You are not holding the system in your hand, but this is something you can't do on this unless you brought a kickstand and brought a spare set of Joy-Con, which you could, and I think if you added all that up, it would still be, smaller than the base Switch, but it's just like it turns this single-use item into something that's more of like a bag of peripherals.
Yeah, and actually, hilariously enough, that's not handheld mode, Brian. That's tabletop mode.
Oh.
Yeah.
So you're saying the Switch Lite is like a baby in that it's much smaller than a normal person, and also you have to take a lot of stuff with you when you take it out on the road.
Yes.
Got it. Joe, you've also been playing with the Switch Lite. What are some of your impressions?
I honestly, the thing I want to go back to, because Tom mentioned it briefly there, is the face buttons feel so good. I can't stop pressing them. I was trying to work out
weird
what
dude.
they... I know, it's weird, isn't it? I just sit there. I was trying to work out what they reminded me of, and Matt in our office pointed out that they feel way more like the Pro Controller buttons, the Switch Pro Controller, and those feel really nice as well. And it is that form factor. It's that feeling of using something that feels really nicely designed. The only thing that I keep thinking is just, what happens if I get Joy-Con drift on this thing? What is the out for that now?
Right.
Because I've
You'll
got
send the whole
two sets
unit
of
in.
Joy-Con. I can send off the ones I have.
Right.
But I don't want to send away my whole Switch. Like, it seems crazy. So I'd love to hear Nintendo go, yeah, we fixed that problem, by the way, but nothing's come out about that.
Yeah,
so
and
it is a worry.
On the plus side, it'll never be bricked by a third-party dock.
There is that.
Sorry, bud.
But the face buttons are awesome. Because they don't have that round bubble feel to them.
Well, even more than that,
they're flat.
They depress more.
Yeah.
They actually the technical term with ouch. The technical term with keyboards is action, which is what I said earlier. It's just that how much does the button move when you press into it? And the Joy-Con buttons, they don't really go at all. They're very, very shallow.
Right.
And these buttons actually have a bit of give to them without losing that clickiness. And it's, Joe, you're right. They feel a lot better. And it's something that I'm appreciating more and more as I use this device more. It feels, in a way that the Switch doesn't, it feels like a proper handheld device, a proper Nintendo handheld, right?
Yeah.
The Switch is a wonderful handheld, and the fact that it can play these incredible games on the go is incredibly impressive. And this feels like Nintendo going, okay, let's get back to our roots of designing really nice handheld devices that don't have to be held back by all this other stuff with the TV and the Joy-Cons and all that jazz. And they completely succeeded in that, but the trade-off is it doesn't have all that stuff.
Yeah, and to me, this is like also Nintendo sort of putting the nail in the coffin in the 3DS. You know, like this is a genuine handheld. It's only meant for handheld play. It is meant to sort of replace this one vertical that they had for the last, couple decades. I haven't spent a ton of time with it. I only played it briefly at your desk, and my initial thought was like I didn't really like the way it felt because I feared change. But I think that's just I think it's just a muscle memory thing. Honestly, like picking it up, it just felt like very, very light to me. Which obviously that's the name of it, but it was just it kind of freaked me out a little bit. Like just playing it for as little as I did, I was like, I'm not really sure if I like this. I need to spend more time with it before I can give you like an actual opinion on that. But that is the Switch Lite. Your final review is coming down
Probably next week.
next week.
Yeah, probably next week.
Okay.
Probably by the time NVC goes up next week, we'll have a final score on it. But that sort of depends on if there are any lingering questions, which I don't think there will be beyond what Joe has already raised, which is,
How do you
Joy-Con drift wasn't an issue for the Switch until months afterwards.
Sure.
And we only realized then it was this big thing. And we're not going to wait months and months to put a final score on this, but it is a concern.
The one lingering question, which you and I talked about, figuring out a way to convey this story to our audience, is like, how do you make two Switches work? Which is way too complicated to answer right now. So we'll pocket that.
Yeah.
Which you can do now.
But if you check out my review, I have a big blue box out in the middle of the review that kind of breaks down, hey, if you're thinking of this as your second Switch, here are some of the things to consider that are a little bit annoying with it.
So
It's both easy and kind of a pain.
Look for Tom's final review next week. And remember, if you see any weirdos on the bus with sweaters over their heads, they're probably just playing Nintendo Switch Lites. We talked a lot about those games and those systems, so we're running short on time for Sayonara Wild Hearts. So Joe and Tom have been playing this super cool game in 3 minutes or less. Please tell me what you think of this game, what it is, who should play it, why you should play it. Go.
Sayonara Wild Hearts is essentially like, they call it an interactive pop album.
Great.
And it's basically a rhythm style game. Think along the lines of something like Rez or something like that. But it's just this weird, amazing fever dream of a game that is so fast-paced and so colorful, and the music rules, and it's constantly changing things up on you, where like one moment you're on a motorcycle and then like another motorcycle comes up to you and suddenly you're both standing on your motorcycles having like a button timing sword fight, and then the motorcycle turns into a plane and you fly off, and then there's
Spoilers.
like anime poses. It's just like a really weird, amazingly cool, strange game. And I'm like head over heels in love with it. It took me an hour and a half to beat, and then I immediately played it again, and I've been playing my favorite songs here and there on the train all week.
That's awesome. Joe?
I had such an unbelievably quick turnaround on this, from going, what is the point in this? And then reaching the first full song and going, oh my God, this is unbelievable.
Yeah.
I don't want to spoil what the kind of stuff you do is
Thanks,
in this,
Joe.
but as it goes on, there have been about 6 separate times when I'd take a whole game of this.
Yeah.
What you're doing is so much fun for such a short time. Like, it's that Mario effect where you're like, why isn't this mechanic all the way through the game? Oh, it's because there's 10 of them.
Yeah.
Like, it's so good.
Yeah,
I love it.
And to Joe's point too, the first 5 or so songs are like brief, like they're too short, I'd say, and then you get to that one where it's like an actual song with like multiple choruses, and it's just like it clicks. It is so cool.
Yeah, this is a game that I've been tracking for a while. I'm really, really stoked to play it. I think visually it looks stunning. Not like it looks unlike anything else, really. And I'm a sucker for like a good rhythm game and also like a good pop album. So this is right up my alley. I can't wait to play this, and I'm bummed that I haven't had an opportunity to yet. I gave my code to Joe because I wanted him to play it for this show.
I will say real quick also, we do have a full review on IGN. Our reviewer, Kyle Hilliard, gave it a 7.9. And just to raise some of the things he mentioned in that, it is fairly easy. It's not a game that is meant to overly challenge you unless you're going like full on score attack for it. Otherwise, it's really just an experience of like, this is so weird and cool. And that's at least the appeal to me.
I thought you reviewed it.
No.
I thought you reviewed all Switch games.
No.
Oh, well,
It's a lie.
you learn something new every day.
Joe reviewed one today, even.
I don't even know which one you're talking about. You had an opportunity, Joe, you were talking about Divinity Original Sin earlier, and it turns out our friend Tom and our friend Casey got to sit down and talk with one of the developers of that game. Can you tell us a little bit about this interview before we throw to it?
Yeah, we're going to throw to an interview. Casey and I interviewed Sven Vinke, I think I'm pronouncing that right, who is the founder and CEO of Larian Studios, and we just basically got to pick his brain about Divinity Original Sin 2 and the process of porting it over, and some of the challenges and some of the draws of that. And it's a really fun little thing, so I hope you enjoy it.
Let's take a look.
Here we go! Hey everyone, Casey and Tom here with Sven Vinke, founder of Larian Studios. He's going to talk to us about Divinity Original Sin 2 for the Switch, the Definitive Edition. So the first Divinity Original Sin 2 came out for PC in 2017, and then the Definitive Edition and Console Edition came out in 2018, and now we finally have it for Switch. Can you tell us a little bit about it first?
Hi, by the way.
Hello, welcome. Thank you so much for joining us.
So Original Sin 2 is a turn-based RPG in which you set out with either on your own or with a party of up to 4 players on a quest to become a god. And it features an incredible amount of freedom. You can play in many ways. It has a combat system that's a lot of fun. We always wanted to have it work on the Switch because it is a very natural way to play a game like this on the go because it's turn-based. So I'm very happy that we finally managed to get it working because it took us a long time to get it sorted out. And we're also really happy with the quality of the port because it plays seamlessly. So very happy with it.
Did you always plan to have a year after PC release have consoles and a year after the rest of the consoles come out for Switch?
So when we launched the PC version, I wanted all focus to be on the content of the game. And so I knew from experience that if we were going to try to do a cross-platform release, we would probably have to jeopardize some of the content. And so I never thought we were going to get it to work on the Switch, so it was an experiment. So once we figured out how to do the game with a controller, well on the PS4 and the X1, the next challenge was, okay, how hard can we optimize this game? All right, so how hard can we do it without losing the quality? And so, to be honest, for a very long time, we didn't think it was going to ship. It was just like something that was going on in the background, and the team that was working on it, they presented milestone after milestone, and like, oh, well, still a long way ahead. And then suddenly it was like, hey, hold on a minute, this is really playing well. And so there was a long list of problems to solve. So, but we started solving those. And so here we are today. We have a Switch version of Original Sin 2, which you can play in multiplayer on the Switch, even with cross saves with PC. So it's really, really cool.
It's an interesting thing because there's not a lot of games like this out on Switch really at all. And I think that more and more stuff is coming and being ported to Switch, and everyone's very excited about that. But can you give me like a little bit of like the developer behind the scenes? Like what makes it like so desirable to come to Switch, but then also B, like what makes it such a challenge? Because it seems like people really want to be on the console, but also have trouble doing so a lot of the time.
So I can give you a very honest answer on why I wanted it to be on Switch, because I'm looking for games like this to play on the go. So a lot of my life is traveling, and so most of my gaming, to be honest, is on the Switch these days, sitting on a plane. So I need games like this in my life, and there's very, very little to be found on the Switch right now. So
this was totally selfish.
Super. I'm still like, when a plane takes off, I start up into the breach. So, it's very, very, very selfish. So that's one reason. I mean, and our lives have become more mobile also, right? So you play at home on your big screen, but then you move and you don't necessarily want to stop playing. So you want to be able to continue playing. That's where the cross save came from. But the reason why it's hard is because, it doesn't have as many CPUs, or it doesn't have the GPU that the bigger system has. And so, especially when you're making a game that's multiplayer, like Original Sin 2, which actually has a server running in the background, also on this poor Switch, that has to simulate 4 gameplay sessions simultaneously. That's a lot to ask of the silicon that's on the inside. And so it's not that it's impossible, obviously, otherwise it wouldn't work, but it requires a lot of extra effort to get it to run. And there are always compromises that you have to make. And so the question then is, like, to what point do you want to make a compromise? There's a certain point where you say, okay, that's a compromise I don't want to make, and because the game suffers tremendously from it, which is why I'm happy that we managed to get it to work.
And that server thing is really interesting, because I feel like a lot of the times people just assume like, oh, you just tune down the graphics, right? And that'll make it work. And it's not just that, it sounds like.
No, I mean, like, memory is a very big challenge. We are spoiled on the other systems for memory. So, but the gameplay requires a lot of memory. And so we still have to get all of the same gameplay working on a Switch. And Divinity Original Sin 2 is a game in which the party can split itself apart and go in 4 different directions on one big map. And so we have to simulate those 4 sessions of the players all on one of these switches who's acting as a server. So, and to get that to work, because one of the key things, and I hope if you try it out that you notice that, is it had to run consistently at 30 FPS so that it felt smooth as you were going through it. So getting that to work together with all that multiplayer, considering all the stupidities that you can do in the game, like exploding entire villages, was quite a challenge.
Can you tell me what you're most proud of accomplishing on the Switch version, and the thing that you're most disappointed about having to cut?
So I am super happy that we got the cross saves to work, because that's not only a technological achievement, and we're the first game to feature it, cross saves between Steam and Switch, but it's also the fact that we got and Nintendo and Valve to talk to each other, get all of this going. Like this all started at the breakfast with the guys from Steam and said, well, why can't we do this, guys? And they said, yeah, why can't you? Well, what does that mean? Like, we went to Nintendo and says, well, why can't we do this? And they looked at each other, yeah, why can't we? And then suddenly things started happening. They were really awesome about it. So I'm really happy about that. I'm also really happy about the fact that it actually runs really well. It's really playable. It's not like a port where you say, I'm not going to finish it. It actually really plays well. The one thing that we had to drop was split screen. That's when we thought about it originally, obviously, because you had the 2 controllers, we were saying, well, split screen is going to be awesome on this thing, but that was just too much. We tried, but there was no way that we're going to get it to run fast enough. So that was the sacrifice that we made.
I have to ask, and I don't mean to put you on the spot here, but any chance that fans of the original will get to see the first Divinity Original Sin come out on Switch at any time in the future?
Oh, we've talked about it, obviously. The problem is that Divinity Original Sin 2 is running on what we call 3.5 of our engine, and DOS 1 is working on, I think it's 2.0. So it wouldn't, the engines are not the same anymore. So we would have to do a tremendous amount of effort to get DOS 1 to run on it. We use some middleware in our game, so we'd still have to get that middleware to work also. So we're not even sure if you would have the middleware working on our current versions. I haven't checked that. So yeah, I'm sad, not necessarily going to happen.
Yeah,
Okay.
sounds like it's a little more than just a take what you did on DOS 2 and move it over sort of thing. You'd have to pretty much start over.
Yeah, so there would be a big step involved in getting. I'm not saying that it's impossible. Maybe, who knows? You know, like, I mean, we've said things in the past that we were never going to do, and then we did them. So I don't know. We'll see. But right now, I can honestly say nobody's working on it.
So you told me that you weren't sure if you were going to get Divinity Original Sin 2 working on the Switch. When did you start working on it, and at what point, how recently did you know it was going to work?
So we had a team from Spain. They're called Blitzworks. They're awesome people. So they did most of the Switch port for us. And so they've been working on it since last year, a bit more than last year, I would say. Well, those conversations happened around the same GDC and E3 that we were talking to the people at Valve, if my memory is correct, because it might be a little bit wrong there. They started going through all of the code, looking for ways of optimizing it. It took a long time to first getting to run, to basically get to the main menu. And once the main menu was there, it was the first arrival on the beach of Fort Joy, because that's where we defaulted. We didn't do the tutorial. And then for a long time, it was like, well, I can get to the gates of Fort Joy, which is like the first hub in the game, but it crashes because it runs out of memory. And then eventually we got that area to work. And then we went to the next map, which is even bigger, which is Driftwood. And so it never got there because it crashed right away. And then it went to the mother of all memory nightmares, which was Arx, the main city, which really required a lot of memory because there's a lot of NPCs clustered together. And so that crashed quite a long time that we were running out of memory. So by then we had systems that were automatically testing playthroughs through the entire game, seeing if there's enough memory there, if performance is okay, giving heat maps where you can see red spots, problem, green spots, okay. And so eventually the entire heat map turned green. I said, okay. They've did it. They've done it. Well, maybe there might still be some yellow spots.
And that's really interesting to hear, because you said also that it was like you didn't think it was going to happen, and then suddenly it sort of seemed like it could. And I imagine that's sort of one of those serious things where if you are in a city, if the whole game is running fine, but there's one city that you enter it and you just immediately crash the game every time. Yeah. Once you fix that, it suddenly looks a little bit brighter out, right? Like it suddenly seems a little more doable.
That's the thing with optimization, right? So every single time you solve a bottleneck, you don't know what's going to come after, because that one bottleneck blocked all the rest. And so it can be incredibly frustrating, because you can just go like hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of these bottlenecks that you encounter. And then suddenly you say, hey, there's nothing blocking me anymore. Maybe some edge cases, and you've solved it. And that's the thing. So I think that we went through a very dark valley with the port before the light started coming at the end of the tunnel. My metaphors are a bit wrong here, but this was literally it. So I mean, like the producer that worked on it is sitting very close to me to see if I'm saying everything correctly. And so he was just telling me that it's a miracle that it worked out, because there were moments where I really thought, okay, it's never going to work. I mean, we're going to have to give up here, because we just keep on hitting wall after wall after wall. So yeah, we consider it quite an achievement.
Well, I'm super happy that Divinity Original Sin 2 Definitive Edition is available on the Switch now. It's been available since September 4th, which was, honestly, that was my favorite announcement from that Nintendo Direct, because I did not expect it at all, especially with the cross-cloud saves. I just thought it was amazing.
It was a great surprise.
Yeah, incredible.
Yeah, it got a lot of attention, so that worked out. It was cool from Nintendo also to do that.
And I have to ask you while you're here, it's okay if the answer is no.
Or no comment.
Or no comment. But is there any possibility of getting Baldur's Gate 3 on the Switch years in the future?
Oh, man. I'm not gonna. I honestly don't know. I don't know what the next Switches are gonna look like. On this particular Switch, that might be a bit problematic. I mean, it does. There are quite a lot of upgrades that have been done on BG3, so I think it would be very, very hard. But then again, you never say never again. You never know, you know. I mean, maybe we'll figure out some magic trick, and it'll work. I mean, like I just hope. I mean, as personally as a fan, I hope that the next Switch is going to have like triple the power and triple the battery life, and so that we
that
can.
Nintendo?
To do the no, it's an amazing device. So
Yes,
it's
absolutely.
I just hope that it's going to keep on. It has a very long life with lots of upgrades that we can keep on playing all the games that we're playing on other consoles also when we're on the go. This is yeah.
So while we have you here, what is your favorite game on the Nintendo Switch that isn't Divinity Original Sin 2?
Well, I already referred to it. It's Into the Breach.
All right.
I mean, like I never played it on PC, so I discovered it on the Switch, and so I just kept on playing it. It's the game that I kept on going to. My other go-to game is Dead Cells, so I spend a lot of time playing that also. I have a harder time playing the big third-person games on the Switch. That doesn't go that well for me. It's maybe, I don't know, it's probably I have very big hands. But the things that are slower paced, I like playing a lot.
Do you have any last questions, Tom?
No, I'm good. Thank you so much for joining us. This was wonderful.
Yeah, thank you. Really appreciate it.
Thanks for having us. Take care.
And that was Sven Vinke, the founder of Larian Studios, talking about Divinity Original Sin 2. We're going to get right back to our regular programming. Thank you again.
Bye.
Listen.
Wow, what a great interview that was that I definitely just watched right now live.
A quick note on that too. Sven mentioned a trailer that was dropping. He said today. That was actually a few days ago, so you can go watch this trailer about how they incorporated Steam Cloud saves into the Switch version and the process of that. It's very silly and fun.
Time travel is difficult.
It is.
Yeah. So now it is time for our favorite game, Question Block.
Game of the year.
You guys ready to play?
Yeah.
First question comes from our friend Stealth. You can follow him at Stealth40K. Good dude, great Twitter presence. He's been a fan of MVC for a long time. He says, now that Grezzo is done remaking Link's Awakening, what Nintendo game would you like to see them remake next?
I mean, the obvious answer is the Oracle games, right? But I think the one that really needs it is Skyward Sword. That is the game that needs the most amount of work. I think there's a lot of good stuff buried in there underneath the very frustrating stuff like housing and, you know, them reminding you how much a rupee is worth every time you pick one up. That's one that's like sort of connected to one system specifically. And I would love them to find a way to port that to Switch, maybe with optional motion controls and maybe just let us use joysticks.
Yeah, I also was going to say Skyward Sword, but you took that and all of my good points. So I will say Minish Cap, just because I like the Oracle games, but I think Minish Cap is a better game. Tom?
Does it have to be Zelda?
Nah.
Yoshi's Island.
The original?
Yeah.
What the heck? That game is almost perfect.
I know, but
Didn't you just finish a
Brian,
playthrough,
wasn't
right?
Link's Awakening almost perfect?
Yeah.
Okay,
Like
that's fair.
I think if they did a Link's Awakening style remake of that game where they just faithfully recreate it and then add a little bit and tweak a little bit here and there to loosen out some of the rough edges, like I think that would be awesome.
Joe, you got any opinions on this?
Trick answer. Don't make them remake things. Let Grezzo make a game. They made some of the Street Pass games. They're amazing. I love Street Pass
That's
games.
true.
Let's do that again.
That's such a good answer.
That is a really good answer. Okay, the next question comes from Carl Denovio in our Facebook group. That's Nintendo Voice Chat podcast forums on Facebook. He asks, who at IGN can do the longest handstand?
Definitely not me.
I think probably Casey. I think Casey is probably like very good at a handstand.
I bet Jobert.
She works out a lot.
Jobert, yeah.
Jobert is probably, he's got a lot of upper arm strength.
Yeah, and he's lower to the ground, so he's got less to balance.
Joe, who in the IGN UK office could do a handstand?
I'd say Mr. Dale Driver. He's a powerful unit of a man, but he's also not. He's not like he's that lean muscle. I reckon he doesn't need to hold up much, but he's got a lot to hold it up with.
Right.
Right. That was Handstand Chat. Robin Friend, also over on the NVC podcast forums, asks, for those getting a Switch Lite, what would you say are the games that truly shine the most in handheld, not gimmick-wise, but gameplay-wise?
Oh, man, that's a good question.
That's why I put it on the list.
Witcher 3.
Hmm?
Everything we've seen of that game docked does not look great, but on handheld, it really shines. And I think if you shrink the screen, it's going to look even better.
Yeah, I do find that those sorts of games, like I mentioned that I've been playing a lot of Dragon Quest XI, and that game looks amazing in docked mode, but it looks even just like a little bit sharper in handheld mode. So I would say probably Dragon Quest. Yeah.
I have no idea.
Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight.
Hollow Knight. Yeah. It's so beautiful and looks incredible on the Switch screen, but it has the sort of ambience of a handheld game whilst being gigantic. Oh, I love it so much. It's perfect.
I won't talk about Hollow Knight because then we would be here all day.
Yeah, I was actually surprised that you didn't have a bigger reaction to Joe's.
I'm trying to contain myself.
You look
I'm in that sort of period where I've like put myself into a cocoon waiting for Silksong, and until then, I like can't use that energy. I need to just store it.
You got to just keep it locked away.
Yeah,
I understand. Keep it secret. Keep it safe. Charles Hart over on Twitter asks, if you decided to eat a Sirfetch'd, should you eat it with its leek to enhance the flavor, or without its leek so that it could be passed on to another Sirfetch'd of its kind?
Oh, I have an answer for this.
Okay.
Clearly, I think Brian is right that the leek has evolved into a green onion, and I think that green onion is overripe, and you probably wouldn't want to eat it anyway.
Fair enough.
I think you could cut the top of it for garnish.
Oh, okay.
Which is good.
Yeah.
Good to do. Throw it on salads, mashed potatoes, fun stuff like that. I would eat the whole thing.
I worry that
It's chicken and onions, right?
I worry that Sirfetch'd, given his penchant for battle, would maybe be like a little gamey. So maybe you got to cut that with like a nice shallot.
Yeah. I mean, I think he'd like a Cornish hen.
Yeah, exactly.
You know?
That's what I'm thinking about.
Yeah, it'd be delicious.
Why do we always talk about eating Pokemon on this show?
Because
People love to ask these questions.
Yeah, I want to do this. I ate a Pokemon on the show. I'll eat all the Pokemon on the show. I don't care.
It's
We're
delicious.
not engaging with the second half of this question, which is that he thinks that if we don't eat the leek, it should be passed on to another one of its kind. That's like killing someone and giving their shirt to their friends. Like, that's weird.
This is a weird side note, but I went to a like fancy crab restaurant in Miami that only serves crab claws, and their thesis is basically they will catch whole crabs and take one claw and then throw it back, and so the crab regenerates it. So you don't ever eat the crab; you only eat the arms. So it's an entire restaurant full of arms. And all the crabs are like, well, that was a pain in the ass, but I got a new arm, and then they take it again.
Do you think that like the surrounding area of that restaurant is just full of crabs with like one big claw and then like one little tiny claw?
Yeah, and so I think
that's adorable.
I think with Sirfetch'd, if you took his leek, he'd be pissed, but he'd grow a new one, and you wouldn't kill him.
This scares me.
I love a good curveball in the middle of the show. Last question this week comes from Captain Logan on Twitter, who asks, if GameStop ends up closing, what do you think will be the future for old physical games? Right now, I imagine they hold a large collection of gaming history. Will they end up in private collections, or will the rest end up in landfills?
Those will be... I mean, you guys were around for like Tower Records going away, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Those stores got liquidated and then pushed into annexes, which were basically like sister stores, which were extremely liquidated. And you could go in and basically just like find, old like collector's editions and stuff like that, box sets of movies and CDs and stuff for literal pennies. And those things would start off with like 20% off, and then would go to 30%, 40%, 50%. And then the last week it would basically be 90%, and they were even selling the shelves. Same thing happened with Circuit City. Like, we've been through enough retail apocalypses at this point that I think we would see it go down like that. And so I think gamers would ultimately get their hands on all of their products.
Yeah, I don't necessarily feel like games would just end up in landfills. Like, obviously, the big example here is E.T., but that's a bad game. But there's a market out there, a collector's market for just about every platform, every genre, every, form factor, right?
Yeah.
Like, I myself right now am working on amassing a GBA collection. Why? I don't know. I just feel like it'd be cool to own a lot of those games.
Yeah.
A lot of the good ones. I don't care about a lot of that like third-party shovelware stuff that's on there. But I don't think that the end of a retail store necessarily means the end of physical releases. Like, I think that physical releases are doing a good enough job of ending themselves with their digital counterparts.
Yeah.
But I think that there will always be a market for a tangible cart or disc or whatever, you know.
I think you look at something like limited run games, and they're obviously holding on to that to a certain degree. There are games that only get digital releases that limited run games will be like, hey, we are making a short run of that on Switch, and you can get the box, and it comes with like a keychain and a poster and a sticker and all that fun stuff. I think that will always exist in some form, but I do think that this will be a pretty big blow to the larger conversation about physical versus digital video games.
Gentlemen, anything on that?
I think it's interesting because you look at this stuff like the kind of physical first like retailer market seems to keep going down, but secondhand stuff is everywhere still. Certainly over here, like you can find secondhand games on every high street, and I think it feels like we're kind of possibly getting towards the end of the retailer selling you the original version of that game. Maybe that will become direct to consumer, like with limited run games and that kind of thing. But I don't think the secondhand market's going to go away anytime soon. Like people still like owning things. So it turns out that's the basis for like the economy. So it kind of works.
Right. Well, I feel like that probably about wraps us up this week. It's been a big jumbo-sized show this week, so thank you to each of you for hanging with me. Brian, what's something that you've done this week that you're proud of, and where can people find you when you're not on NVC?
You can find me on Beyond. You can find me on Twitter at Agent Bizzle, and I wrote a bunch of wiki guides content for Link's Awakening, and I did a lot of it sort of in my weird voice, so hopefully it's fun if you get stuck, and if you're looking for bottles and hidden Nintendo figurines, we got your back.
Give us an impression of the weird voice.
I mean, this voice just like writing.
Oh, okay. All right. Okay. Dang, I was really hoping that it was like some kind of squeaky voice.
I did the whole thing as Kermit. Yeah.
Great. This week, I've done a lot. We've done a lot of stuff on social that I'm really proud of. I don't need to go into it here, but you can follow IGN on every single platform, and we've got some fun stuff. We've got some news out there. My name is Zach, and you can follow me at ZachariasD on Twitter, and I'm here most weeks on NVC. Tom, what about you?
Yeah, same thing.
Which?
You can also follow me at ZachariasD.
Cool.
No,
great.
Don't follow me on Twitter, but do read my Switch Lite review in progress, and then maybe the final review next week, and then the Goose Game. I'm very, very happy with the Goose Game review that I have working.
Several honks are coming.
It's
watch Tom and I's review in progress video too.
Yeah.
'Cause it's like it's kind of DLC for this episode.
Yeah, pretty much. And the Goose Game review is one of the, like, the entire time I was writing it, I was basically like, what would Seth Macy say here?
I can't imagine it. Like, I'm sure it's just chock full of puns.
The Goose Game?
Mm-hmm. No, I mean your review.
Oh, it's too many.
Yes.
Too many.
Yeah.
Like too many.
Joe, take it away.
I'm on Twitter at 2+2 is Joe, and I'm also on the IGN UK podcast, which we talk about lots of things that IGN do, not just like our warm beer and wet bacon. And
it's weird wet bacon.
It is very strange.
Yeah.
It's so good. You people are weird.
What?
With your crispy long bacon.
What?
Come
You're
on,
describing a delicious thing. How do you make that sound bad?
Because ours are like
tiny, better than crispy at
ours
breakfast.
are like tiny little pork chops. They're amazing.
Okay, well, that's a different kind. I'm okay with that. I like little pork chops.
Stop this. We have to end the show.
I'm proud of it's. Hopefully, people interested in this stuff will have read the Link's Awakening thing. It's slightly off-brand, but I've started a new series with my friend Simon Cardy where I'm playing The Last of Us for the first time, and I think it's fun. And there's a new episode on Sunday.
Yeah, great first episode of that show. We also didn't get a chance to talk about your Daemon X Machina review. I'm sorry, we ran out of time on that, but I will plug that review for you. It's a great review for a game that is okay. And that's the end of our show. This is NVC, Nintendo Voice Chat, IGN's #1 Nintendo show, every Thursday at 3 p.m. here on IGN.com and on YouTube.com. If you've got comments, if you've got questions, if you've got concerns, jump on over to the NVC podcast forums on Facebook and let us know. Special thanks to Logan, our NVC intern, and we will see you guys next week where you can
get the thing.
Get it.